Hi, I'm Chris Flanagan from the University of Syracuse Graduate School and talking today with AD Carson, currently at the University of Virginia, about his non-monographic project, Owning My Masters. Hi, AD.
Peace, how's it going?
Great to talk to you today. So let's just jump straight into the questions. We've obviously discussed a little bit in advance. So just to start, sort of a little bit autobiographically, talk about the dissertation itself and the process you went through creating it. What made you actually want to undertake a non-monographic project in the first place?
Yeah, I think that my goal wasn't to do a non-monographic project. My goal was to do the work that I'd already been doing. And it turned out that the way it made sense was the website kind of serving as an archive and the album doing the heavy lifting of the kinds of expressions and responses that I wanted to give to the questions that I'd been asking. And then I guess more largely, it serving as a way, not the way, but a way to intervene into some of those questions that I thought were really interesting about how the university engages with Black study or Black art or artifacts that don't fall into these really neat categories of scholarship.
And for those viewers who aren't familiar with it, could you tell us just a little bit about Owning My Masters, the project and the album?
Yeah, so the project is, well, it is a 34-track album. It's a rap album that exists inside of a digital archive that has, I've got a video station there with interviews and some videos that I've made for some of the songs. There is some prose there. There's a blog because there were lots of things going on campus and with regard to the project. And then there's a timeline that's annotated that begins the day that I got to campus and goes all the way up through, I believe, all the way up through graduation. And it deals with a number of issues, but more than anything, my hope is that it gives you ways, gives readers, listeners, ways that we might think about hip hop as a way to see, view, and engage all of the things that we might in other kinds of scholarship. So, what does it mean to think through hip hop? And very often the things that I'm trying to see aren't necessarily hip hop. The things that I'm trying to help audiences see. So one of the things might be like the university. How does the university change when we engage it through hip hop or when we think about it through hip hop? And well, it changes quite substantially. The way that we might do, say, a lit review. What does a lit review of hip hop look like? And I think that there are people who might be able to come up with some really good answers to that question, honestly. But if we were going to think about all of the things that might be present in a rap album before we write that rap album, how might we present a succinct list of those things without listing all of the records that exist from not just 1973, but we're going back to the 50s and 40s, all of the records that influence hip hop that go all the way up to the moment that you're starting to write that album. So we might say, here are some influences of mine, but I don't know if they're really going to come out in this album that I'm going to write. Or we're talking about events that are happening currently, while at the same time, I'm reading books that clearly have been written in the past. So how might you fairly represent how much influence you're getting from a theory text and some actual thing that's happening, say, in Sanford, Florida, or Ferguson, Missouri, or Baltimore, Maryland? So I think that the timeline kind of helps folks find themselves in the current moment, while something like a bibliography helps people find where the thinking is, or who I'm thinking with. And the lit review is a more difficult document. So there's a song called SAT, which I use to mean 16 at a time, where I'm interviewing Mark Anthony Neal about what the archive looks like for hip hop, or for hip hop artists, or for hip hop scholars. And in doing that, I'm trying to say that, well, all of the stuff that I just said, I'm trying to say that for the people who are listening to the album, that this kind of has to be done differently. Because if I was doing that thing, that document that I'm being asked to do, I don't know how much is going to help my project really. That was a struggle with the person who was running that part of my process for me and my colleagues, because I was very intent on doing the most practical version of this project that could exist. And I felt this is a thing, I'm sort of close to where I want to go, but now I'm being asked to do this other thing that really feels like it has no use for my project. And I've really thought about this, not just saying I want to get away with not doing the work, but the work that I feel like I need to do is a different kind of work than the work I'm being asked to do. Yeah. So I did the thing that I was that I felt I needed to do. And after I finished that, he said, okay, I understand. I kind of get what you're doing. I don't know that that helped him like get the project, but it definitely helped give him an idea of why this would have to be different. And I don't know, it felt productive, even though there was quite a bit of tension up to that moment. And so the album kind of occurs roughly chronologically. And I think that that's really important as well, because I would hate for someone to listen to the beginning of the album and decide that, it's a bad album, or it's bad thinking, or that, like to think about the limitations of the front end of an album without listening to the full project. I think does not serve a listener well for this project, because what you're getting at the front end of the album are kind of the first things that I made for the album. And I think that for me is also kind of a comment on time and the ways that like an album maybe like even subverts that you imagine that the first track on an album and the last track on an album occur in the same kind of thinking space. Yep. And that's not always how that happens. Like in my most current album, I think that the last track on the album is the I want to say that the last track on the album is one of the first that I was thinking, and the one that I've been working on longest. But because they don't occur that way, and we think about them as one thought, but they're kind of like trapped in time. I don't know, it's an interesting place to deliberate, to like really think about what might be happening. So I wanted that to be a part of the process, so that when you look at that timeline, which is also occurring, chronologically, the album is kind of occurring along that same line. And then the bibliography is like alphabetical, which there are hyperlinks in the website that will give you a reading list for each term. so that you won't be sort of thrown off by this, the organization of like the larger bibliography.
Yeah, that, Eddie, if I could just follow up a little bit, because maybe people don't know this, but so owning my master's is engaging critically with the university. You were a grad student at Clemson.
Yes.
And it's about Clemson University and kind of the prehistory of Clemson University and how that institution came to occupy the position that it does from a critical standpoint. So not only are you trying to convince faculty at the institution to accept this rap album as a dissertation, but you're also potentially ruffling some feathers just in terms of the content that you're dealing with. So that seems like a high bar to clear. You suggested that there was some tension with the faculty that you were working with. Could you just kind of quickly kind of give us an overview of what that process was like, going from this idea in your head, maybe I'm going to do a rap album for my dissertation, to actually having that happen and succeed and pass as your dissertation? Well,
yeah.
Just quickly,
Yeah.
what was that process like?
Yeah. So I think that, well, hip hop is local. I think that, at its most effective, it's local, that we are kind of thinking about where we are right now and what we do, given where we are. And I mean that not just like raps about, or rappers rap about what's happening outside, but I think that we're thinking about who's in the space, what the space looks like, how it's designed, all of that. Well, the university there at Clemson really inspired the idea of doing the album that comes from that place. And so it's responding to what I walk past, like what land I walk over every day, what structures I walk past every day, what the rules of the place. And some of those rules say you can't say certain things, or that certain icons are to be untouched. And well, I don't know. I mean, I was trying to make sense of the place, there's a plantation house right there in the middle of the campus, and being told that the people who worked at the plantation house were workers or employees, or, I mean, sometimes servants, but never enslaved people.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's a very weird thing that's happening here, that we have this omission. And then if you walk out of the plantation house and you turn left, then you're literally looking down onto the football field, where all of this, not just money is being generated, but that's the reputation of the school. And it seemed odd to me that the reputation of the school that's based on this amateurism, or what is called amateurism, is not coming up in conversations about this past that we are referring to euphemistically. And I think that those two things are related to each other. So how might I connect those things so that we are actively thinking about what it is that we're supporting and how we present ourselves as an institution? The same with, the most iconic building, that they show on television on Saturday mornings whenever, the NFL, or not NFL, the NCAA, when the cameras are there for ESPN. And, that building is named for Benjamin Tillman. And that created a lot of tension with folks, when See the Stripes, the poem, the piece, the actual song came out. I got a lot of blowback from the university, and even trustees reached out asking if they could have lunch with me or if we could have a conversation, and really essentially telling me to tone it down or to stop. And I thought, well, this must be working if these people are so concerned about it being done. And so that made me, I guess ordinarily something like that would slow you down, because you're wondering whether your ability to finish is going to be compromised, or you're not going to be able. I thought, no, I actually need to go harder. I actually need to, dial more into this because, hit dogs holler, and this is definitely what needs to be being done and what hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
So programmatically, the people in the Rhetorics Communication and Information Design program were incredibly supportive of the project, and I think made that part of it easier. I was able to go and talk to someone at the graduate school about the prospect of the project after the prospectus was passed, and we felt that if we got a thumbs up from them, then we would have less to worry about whenever it was time, after the defense, which was really helpful, I think, to say this is coming. We don't know what it's going to look like, but there's going to be a project, and you guys need to figure out what we need to do in order to make that project work. But then, like, sort of in the larger sense, say, like at the university level, it seemed that the university, many folks at the university did not know that this very public work that was happening was connected to this intellectual project, was connected to this dissertation. And, many of them, almost acted as if I was only at the university to try to irritate them.
It was a protest kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that it was only protest. This is about your feelings and not about actual, like about the actual work that we do, like about the rhetorical intervention that's being made into a history that is not serving the place well. Like, number one, it's dishonest about what happened, but that dishonesty about what happened is also making us dishonest about what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't want to say that the university realized anything, but I will say that in 2020, as all the things that were going on in the United States were happening, as we were, most of us, many of us were locked down, and the football team decided that they were going to have a social justice protest in Clemson, and the board of trustees met, and then they finally decided to take John Calhoun's name off of the Honors College. And then they finally decided that they would consider removing Benjamin Tillman's name from that building. I think lots of folks looked back and said, the groundwork for this came from, or at least, is owed in a good part to this album, this rap album.
Yep.
That was a dissertation. And I think that it's not the first time that someone's dissertation work has helped inform something that happened, several years later. It might be the first time that dissertation was a rap album.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important because there are like, I think that that's a tradition rather than like an anomaly that, albums might inspire a certain thing or a certain way of engaging something. And when we go back, we find that the idea started, here in the music or in that culture or, in this very local way. And it wasn't a thing that was only inspired by the national or the global protest. There was actually a local engagement with what was going on. And because folks dialed into that, they paid attention to that, they remembered it. And then they said, whenever folks said, we finally did this, folks were like, yes, we did, but we need to also remember where we've come from, or, where we were just a few short years ago, because in 2016, 5 of us were arrested for doing that very same kind of work that the university. So, I think they did a really, nice job of patting themselves on the back for, being with the times.
Yeah.
But just, 4 years earlier, they were not.
Yeah.
And that's also really important. And students help to get them there. I think that that's the most important part, is that students and community members worked together saying that this is what we want. This is how we believe the university should better serve us. And it took a while for that to take hold.
Yeah. Yep.
So looking at the time, I think we might be best jumping into the second section, but we can definitely link
Sure.
the section questions back in. I
Yep.
think that you flow pretty naturally. So I guess just starting by like drawing on your own experience, AD, what do you think students pursuing like a non-traditional form of project and dissertation project need, Joe, to succeed? Both
Well,
personal qualities and actual, Joe, support institutionally?
of course, they're, like, because I was able to record, write, mix in my apartment because, I had the equipment to do so, that cut out one of the needs for resources. But I do believe that folks need resources to be able to create what they're going to create. Mentorship is really good. I mean, like, good mentorship is good. And I am thankful to have chanced upon some really great mentors. Guidance from people who know what the system looks like is really helpful, and people who are interested in thinking about how we might, there's nothing about owning my master's that doesn't check all of the boxes for a project that they might consider more traditional.
Yeah.
So I didn't not do anything that I was asked. I did more than what I was asked. And having folks understand that was really, really important, because I think that lots of people who will do a non-monographic project might put an advisor in a position of asking them to write about what the project is about or write about that project. And I think that in that way, a lot of times that student is being asked to write 2 projects rather than 1.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be forced to write be forced to submit 2 dissertations. One that is the, like the project that I did. And then the other is contextualizing and explaining what that project is doing, which ultimately like ends up being designed, in the same way that a dissertation would. And that was important. And the space to fail, I feel really good about what owning my master's did and about the ways that people responded to it. But there's so many ways that the project failed. So many ways to me that the project failed, that it did not do what I thought was going to happen. And because of all of these, because it was happening in such a contentious space and it seemed so high profile, I think that there may have been a lot of people at the university that would have wanted it to fail or wanted it not to do what it did. I'm saying that had it not done those things, had the petition, to think about how we refer to buildings on campus, not garnered as much attention, had, like the thing with the football team not happened. Well, if those things don't happen, it doesn't mean that the album is not doing the work that you've set out to do. So had the university said no to the project and I was still ABD, I had a plan for what happens now that now that we realize that a university is not willing to engage with this project in this way, what have we learned? And so I think that my questions were asked in such a way that when or if the university does not say or like engage positively or receive the project, then we've got the next phase of the project. So I was never working with the understanding that folks were going to be okay with it or that folks were going to understand it. And that was important because I didn't want to have a dead end, a dead end that I would arrive at. If they say no, then it's over.
Yep.
Because it wouldn't be over. Like in a certain way, that would be the beginning. But I think that this, what happened when they said yes was also a beginning. It was just a different beginning.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really, really important because of particularly the press around the project makes it seem as if everything is going to happen the same way that this happened. And that's not realistic. Sometimes we ask questions and the most productive answer to the question is no, or not right now, or why is this the thing? Or, if you are the person to do this, and why are you the person to do this? Or is there some better circumstance for something like this to happen, or some different circumstance, if not better? And so all of those things I think are important considerations.
That's a great point. Just quickly, AD, what was your backup plan? Like if the university had said, nope, sorry, not going to fly as a dissertation, what was your vision for the future of the project?
Well, then there's a kind of historical argument that you have for how universities have benefited from the labor of rappers for nearly 50 years. And then when a rapper brings that labor into the space and calls it intellectual work, then an institution like Clemson has said, no, it can't happen. So then maybe I would look at Clemson University's course offerings during that period and see how many people were able to receive credit and how many people were able to teach and engage with hip hop in some way, like both explicit and implicit ways that hip hop has created a learning environment at Clemson, and then connect that to that history that we're thinking about in the same way that those amateur athletes are considered amateur athletes, the way that those enslaved persons were enslaved and tethered to the institution or to the land there. Then my thinking is hip hop within an institution like that seems to be performing a very similar function where it might be a product that is used for the work that goes on there or for whatever is earned there, but it never on its own is going to be rewarded, or the people who make it are never going to be rewarded in the way that the institution rewards itself or rewards the people that it sees as human.
Yeah.
And then we would have a different project that's kind of thinking about that. Now, my thinking hasn't stopped on that. I'm actually still thinking about that in those ways, in those exact same ways. But that would be the focus of the project and not necessarily just the album. Had the album been pushed back or, there was some resistance. And I think I would still have released the music too. Or I would have the music hosted in such a way that maybe it wouldn't be the primary feature. And then, the analysis of what it means might be the primary feature, in a future semester.
Yep.
So I don't think we could touch just on skill set, which I think is a really big question that surrounds non-monographic work.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with your own, the work you did was so heavily reliant upon your existing skills, music as a rapper. How can universities go about trying to make skills more accessible and encouraging people to develop skill sets perhaps outside of the traditional reading, writing, researching skill set they tend to bring, so they can pursue something non-monographic? Or on the other hand, are these kind of projects going to be limited to people like yourself who just have a really strong skill set already there in the back pocket?
Well, I think that's a great question. And one of the things that I think about that I appreciate about the Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Design program at Clemson is that that was encouraged there. So early on in that program, we were being asked to do just all kinds of strange work. We were asked to do Pechakucha responses to texts where it's like 20 images for 20 seconds or something like that, where we're thinking about how we are responding to critical questions. And for a while during the program, we were doing that with whatever resources we have. If you have a Mac, then use whatever's there. If you have, like a PC, use whatever resources you have. And then I think that like at some point during the program, they realized that I think that they partnered with Adobe. And so now they're still doing that same kind of work, or doing these same kinds of interesting responses, and welcoming that, so that when students are thinking about what their projects are going to look like, they're not only thinking about what a traditional dissertation has looked like, they're thinking in all of these ways outside of the page, or maybe some ways inside of the page, but they're thinking about the page in much different ways. And for, like, I think like a hip hop making practice is thinking about what you have, not what you lack, but what you have, and then making the dopest thing that you can out of whatever is there. And in that way, my skill set was like really, really important, but also what was afforded from being in that program, like the video production, the audio production, thinking like in these like hypertextual ways, or even like sort of meta textual ways, like even what meta arguments might exist. How does your project benefit from, how does your argument benefit from it being delivered in this particular way? And then thinking about that argument that's being made by the medium itself. All of those things are kind of embedded in that program, in a program that's thinking about argument. But also we were encouraged to take the classes that were being offered in the library, or to work outside of our particular, to work outside of where we aren't, it wasn't really a department, but to work in other departments. So think about what you're interested in, and then find somebody who's doing that, and then consult with them, work with them, see what it might look like. I remember sending one music scholar, one of the mixtapes from the album, and he's like, in all my, in my years teaching, I think this is the first time I've received a thatpiff.com link for an academic project. And I thought, well, yeah, it's about time. But the fact that, I'd read this person's work, and he'd been writing about rap, like in this like very local sense, with these particular set of artists in that place that he was writing about, and then reached out to him, and, we were able to kind of converse a bit about that. I don't know that it helped me think about design differently, but it definitely made me feel like I wasn't, on an island by myself, that there were people who were working in fields that are related to what I'm doing. And that, that we might benefit, that world might benefit from engaging it a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the openness to interdisciplinarity is probably a key factor in terms of openness to things like non-monographic projects, just because you're talking about people who are more comfortable than people who are siloed in a traditional department, with not being in total command of every aspect of the content or the media, and that translates then into openness regarding format, and kind of this collective mentality of, well, we don't know exactly where this is going, and that's okay. Like, let's see where it goes, and not prejudge like what that outcome needs to be.
Yeah, and I think that there's something about the sort of the embracing a DIY sensibility, a kind of amateurish engagement. And I don't say amateur as in like sort of less skill. I think maybe I'm using the word amateur to think maybe in a certain way about what Fred Moten and Stefano Harney call study. And like particularly thinking about yourself as a student as opposed to like a professional. And then in that way, there are a lot of things that I don't have to worry about, you know, like if like this being a professional recording as opposed to whatever it was. And we also like understand that to be in a lot of ways artificial. So this idea that I have to record, you know, like a polished studio album in order to say the things that need to be said is something that's going to stop me from going out and making the album because I don't have access to a studio, or I don't have access to the right equipment, I don't have access to the right mic. Then you just end up not doing the project at all. But if I'm engaging in study, then I'm literally learning how to do these things and then sharing with you my work.
Yeah.
I'm showing my work and sharing my work. And so, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's like too on the nose, but Owning My Masters is an unmastered album.
Yeah.
But very intentionally so.
Yeah.
You know, it was never meant to be. I mean, I feel myself like as a person who, you know, who is a part of a music making community, a part of, you know, like a larger, you know, like collective of people who do all kinds of things. But I don't see this as, you know, this is not the same as being signed to Sony.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be. And I think that's another thing. So some of these, the skill sets are also like ways of thinking, like ways of knowing, or at least like trying to come into ways of knowing how your work is going to be used. But it's honing particular sets of skills that you might be able to use. So I think of, I mean, there are lots of artists who I know kind of engage in this, where they, you know, you're thinking about a particular thing. I'm thinking about a particular kind of like video editing. I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to find out how to do that. And the work is going to be doing it, but also learning how to do it and showing you my work as I was learning how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really productive, like as showing what a study or what a student of something like this might do. And so there are all kinds of happy accidents along the way. There are also like catastrophic accidents along the way, but sometimes it's sloppy, you know, and it's not, you know, it's not like pro skills. These are skills that we are learning in order to demonstrate the things that we might, you know, that we're interested in, or at least that's the way that I think about it, and I continue to think about it.
Yeah, I just think that's such a great point, because, you know, if you're writing a traditional dissertation, it's still that, right? Like if you're writing a dissertation, you've never written one before. You've never taken on a project like that. You've done things that bear some similarity to it, but certainly not on that scale. And, you know, with all the iteration and all the extra things that you got to learn how to do. Yet I think a traditional monographic dissertation writer often feels like their job is to project this illusion that that's not the case, that they know what the dissertation shows is that I've got it, that, you know, I'm just like my faculty mentors in being like fully professionalized in the discipline. So what you're saying is just seems like so much healthier and more productive way of conceptualizing your relationship to that process. And it would be great if departments could also do more in terms of their own cultures to kind of just let people know that it's a learning process, man. So, you know, just accept that fact and roll with it, and accept the happy results and sometimes unpredictable results of that. I think that would serve students writing traditional dissertations just as much as people like yourself taking on these different kinds of projects. Adi, I know you're almost out of time here, but I don't want to end the discussion without giving you a chance to talk real briefly about your new project. So we're talking to lots of people or several people who are doing these non-monographic dissertations. As far as I know, you're the only one who then also went into a faculty position and has now produced, you've got another album out with University of Michigan Press. I'm sure that's a first for them too. That presumably is going to serve as your major or one of your major research documents for your tenure dossier, right? So this is like this is 2.0 relative to your dissertation. Could you compare those? Just tell us quickly a little bit about the project and maybe compare that experience as a junior faculty member with the experience of doing the dissertation.
Yeah. And I do have I have a few more minutes. Yeah, there's a so there the so I used to love to dream was this. It's not the first project that I did that, you know, that I've done since I left. I actually recorded another album that makes up for the space between defending my dissertation and then starting my job at UVA. But at that point in time, there's nothing inside the academy that is saying, bring us your rap albums. You know, we want to make sure that that you get credit for this. And get credit is like a really, I don't know, it sounds nasty to say it that way, but you know, I mean, it sounds kind of gross, but we know what I mean when I say that, I think. But so I recorded that project, then the next year I recorded another, and then I did another project that was kind of like sound design for a local production of a play here in Charlottesville. And I think all three of those kind of weigh the same as I Used to Love to Dream, except that I Used to Love to Dream was a project that I did with University of Michigan. And we went through the peer review process, a process that they also modified to try to accommodate a sonic project. And I think that it being the first peer-reviewed, I mean, it says the first ever peer-reviewed rap album. It might be the first peer-reviewed album, you know, released by an academic press. But also to think like, well, you know, a first ever peer-reviewed, whatever, like that whole thing, as I said before, there's a community of people that my music making process already engages before the things go out to a public. So like, while like I share a skepticism of what peer review does for rap music in this context, because it's always, you know, like it's always under review by a community of people. But this is significant for what our institutions might be, or how we might engage our institutions in the kind of work that we're going to do, or, you know, sort of that's going to be accepted in these spaces. So I think that that's really, really important. And my colleagues have been supportive. And some of them may be surprised that that was a thing that would happen. But of course, I mean, well, my question would be like, well, what did we expect to be the next thing? And again, as I said before, if, and University of Michigan was the first group of people that I spoke to. When those folks said no, you know, like the initial folks, or when I stopped hearing back from those people or didn't get a response, then I moved on to the next, you know, like the next strategy or the next group of people, you know, that I might be able to ask the questions and see if they're interested in those questions the same way that I'm interested in those questions. And going up for tenure will be the same kind of thing. Like, is this a thing that our institutions or this institution appreciates? Do we believe that it is adding something significant to what we are doing? If the answer to that is no, that doesn't mean that it's insignificant to everyone. It just means that it's not significant enough here.
Yeah.
And so I think that that was like the way that the process of publishing the album went, that Michigan is thinking in broader ways than some of, you know, the other places that I spoke to about what scholarship should and can look like. And so we've had a productive relationship, and I think that they also appreciated the work. They appreciated what the album is and what it offers. And, you know, we're still in the process of figuring out how to make sure as many people as possible hear about the album so they can hear the album, and, you know, to try to make sure that it gets to as many people as possible. It's open access. Folks can stream and download it free. But, you know, I think that, you know, at some point, like the interface, you know, like I think that one of the questions about the interface that we're going to have to think about is how it might better serve a music product, so that people can more easily get to the music and listen to it, as opposed to going to the site and then like the first thing that you see is read book.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's literally not a book. So, but you know, I mean, I think that's one of those ways that we think about even our digital artifacts, they are like sort of operating like with the book as a metaphor. And like maybe we drop the book as the metaphor, and like sort of a sonic metaphor might be like, I mean, because we're talking about albums, and though this album did like I did a short run of vinyl, like, you know, actual vinyl.
Oh, okay.
So it was an album. There is an album that exists for this project. But if we were working with that as the metaphor, then folks who are thinking about the project are thinking sonically rather than thinking about it as a text. And if that happens, then people might be able to go directly to the music. And then I don't have to put the project also on Apple Music or Spotify and Bandcamp and Tidal. And it's in all of those places as well. Even though we want it to be as free as possible, we also have to think about how people are going to access it.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. It's been interesting, and, you know, like a way to give me a lot of stuff to think about. Yeah.
I think we are out of time.
Mm-hmm.
So AD, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you so much. I apologize we didn't get to this like way earlier.
Hey, better late than never. I think you made a lot of great points, and there's a lot of good stuff, good ideas that you shared that we're going to be able to follow up on, and some things that I'm looking forward to getting in touch with other people who've done non-traditional projects and kind of bouncing some of these same ideas off of them and see what they have to say, and try to build up a picture that's going to be useful for students, and just give them a sense that some of these options are out there, and there are things that you can really actually attempt, or at least, you know, take the, don't feel reluctant to take those initial steps to explore what it might look like to do a project that might be original and different, and not exactly what the senior faculty in your department are expecting in a dissertation.
Yeah, no, and thank you all for doing this. This is I think it will be really helpful, and hopefully I have the opportunity to direct students to the resource that you all come up with, so you can, so that, you know, I'm not like sort of saying this weird stuff to students and then they're saying, but how, or, you know, like it becomes this thing. I think this will be really helpful. So I appreciate y'all for that.
Yeah, that's our next big lift. We got to do, work on those resources. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, AD. Really appreciate it.
Thank y'all. Peace.
Thanks, AD.